next we'll have Karel and Alice Starek of the Golden Hoof raise cattle, pigs, sheep, chickens, and ducks on their farm off 75th Street and sell products to their farm members. They use keyline plowing, interseeding cover crops in pasture, managed rotational grazing, biological inoculations, and remineralization to improve their soil, and whatever else Karel wants to tell us about as well.
We started this 27-acre farm with the dark green in 2012, kind of a hobby farm. Started off with sheep. We've expanded. We now also graze these other fields that you can see were cut for hay. In Boulder County, we have about a little more than 200 acres of irrigated grass. And down in the San Luis Valley, we have about 2,000 acres and keep our cow-calf pairs down there. We're doing conception to consumer, start to finish, grass-finished beef with about 90 mothers. And we're also have 10 grass-based dairy cows in Boulder. We have sheep. And when we started, the second career for us after being in the restaurant business, and we took holistic management classes and learned about what they now people are calling amp grazing. And just, I'm gonna have a couple of slides here just to sort of show what we're doing. What we're thinking about, but with the short-term goals, we had very little land. We needed to get the most out of that land. So and we also wanted the animals to do well since we're finishing on grass. So I have the scale there because you're balancing what's good for the land sometimes with what's best for the animals. And we especially wanted to have the highest yields possible. Longer-term goals, we sort of wanted to improve all the soil health principles. We wanted, really healthy animals, didn't want to pay a lot of vet bills, nutrient-dense food. And then our strategy for balancing these goals was to do amp grazing. But then one that you probably hear a little bit less about is, we wanted to maximize photosynthesis in the growing season. We wanted to take advantage of the exponential growth of the grass, and we didn't want to let the grass get old and not growing, and we didn't want to graze it too soon. And people call that the sweet spot. But some of the stuff that Jason was talking about, there's fuel reduction that we might be doing with our cows, crop termination, upcycling nutrients. Stimulating biology. There's a lot of reasons to do this. Ag tax status. We graze on other people's land for them sometimes, and just to diversify your income stream if you're a crop farmer. This is a little potentially nerdy, but we pay for a lot of our leases based on AUMs per acre. And the most important thing here, if you look at some of these fields where we're down at less than 2 AUMs per acre. That's kind of where we start. And if you look at the Web Soil survey from the U.S. Geological Survey, what they say the productivity capacity of our land is much more in these ranges down here, less than 2 AUMs per acre. But when you do this sweet spot grazing that I'm going to explain here in a second, you can start to see that your yields can go up maybe 300–400% based on taking advantage of what's going on in the grass. This is all irrigated. I haven't quite figured out how to do this on our dryland stuff down in the valley. So where we're getting in our home pasture, where we've been doing it the most, we sometimes graze it as often as you would cut alfalfa. So we might graze it 5 times a year. And a lot of times we're grazing it right about a little bit earlier than you might cut hay. So for a lot of these fields, you're talking about a couple grazes during the growing season and maybe one during the dormant season. We use the poly reels to hold the cows back where we want them. We give you generally in the growing season, give them a little fresh grass every day. We, for a nutritional standpoint, we want them to be eating the ice cream off of the crop. You can see here we sometimes, we have one fence set up that's holding the cows back. Whenever we move them, they'll be moving into this next little strip, and then we'll leapfrog the fence over. Sometimes we back fence, sometimes we don't, depending on where the water is. We also mix the sheep and the cows. This is on our home farm, and because we have sheep, we have a high tensile electric woven wire perimeter fence to keep the coyotes out, but we also use these electric nets, which is a lot more labor intensive. And so this is, we kind of graze in strips. This little road is where the water is, and sometimes we'll set up about a week's worth of grazing at a time. And so you can see here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 paddocks set up, and this was the expansion that they were eating in that day. The next day they're going to get something else, and generally we don't want to leave them in there too long because we don't want them to go back and overgraze the grass. So we'll probably start a new strip this next day with a new watering point, and then they'll be off that grass within a week.
Are those bare spots where you've done?
Those are that's bale grazing. At the very beginning when we had less land and in the dormant season, we do a good amount of bale grazing. And sometimes depending on how you feed it out, it can take, you can batch over a little bit like that. But that's not really happening this year. So we're rolling out the bales. Okay, and this is just a little video of setting up electronet. Yeah, this is just setting up the electronet. Sometimes when the grass is really tall, we have to weed whack under it. It's one of the reasons I don't like the electronet. This is what it looks like when we move them into the next paddock. It really doesn't take that much time. Everything's portable. We have these mobile shade structures sitting on telephone poles that we drag around from place to place. So this is the concept of the sweet spot, which is a coined term by Tom Kravick. And basically, this slow growth period of the grasses for a cool season, perennial grass is going to be when it has less than 3 leaves. For warm seasons, probably 4 leaves. And then this at the end of stage 2, where you have this exponential growth that's kind of early, that's around boot stage. And then after it goes reproductive, you're not sinking as much carbon, not putting as much exudates in there. But if we can just be constantly leveraging it, we can start to get some of those really high AUM numbers without hurting the pasture. This is what I mean. This is when we were cutting hay, and we weren't cutting it for maximum yield. We were more cutting it for maximum nutrition, and that might be what it looks like ideally when we're grazing it. But the main thing, it's always good when you're talking about ranching to talk about poop. We're kind of looking. This is sweet spot poop. They say around 2.5-inch cow pie. If it's too loose, there's not enough fiber in there, and you're too early. You're grazing too early. And if you're way into the reproductive stage, you're grazing too late. The poop looks like that. That's pretty much all I have to say. I'm probably raising more questions than not, but I really like this sweet spot concept. In addition to the amp grazing, and we try to always get a first graze in before the solstice on most of the land, so that it doesn't go into that reproductive phase.
Do you notice a difference in dung beetles between the different types of too dry, too wet, any kind of insect activity in the paddies?
I mostly just noticed the difference during the growing. Once the growing season, the temperatures get to the right temperature, then the dung beetles show up and it all just disappears. But in the winter season,
I think the drier ones do have a harder time. The dung beetles have a harder time than the drier ones from us, but not the wetter ones.
Thank you, Carl.